Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Skip Mason,
pastor, preacher, historian, author,
teacher, librarian, archivist, world traveler,
collector, family historian, avid reader, and creator of the popular Vanishing Black Atlanta Facebook page.
But a lot of folks who love history.
Most importantly, he's our dad who loves his family and who taught us the importance of our history and having important conversations.
Join him now for this episode of Conversations with Dr. Skip.
Well, good Sunday afternoon, my brothers and my sisters. I am so delighted to see you and to welcome you back for another CME 150 Facebook Live, YouTube Live conversation. I give God thanks and glory. It's hard to believe that today marks 1 year since I began my conversations. And as I've said often, it was only supposed to be one conversation, and that was with Bishop Othel Lakey. We were just going to talk about the history, and then after that, that would be it. But God had other plans, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I've had to sit with some of the CME's best and brightest. And today is no exception. I am excited about these four servant leaders that I'll be bringing up in just a moment. Let me greet our senior Bishop Lawrence Reddick and Lawrence Reddick III and Sister Wendy Jones Reddick, the chair of our College of Bishops, Bishop Kenneth Wayne Carter and Mrs. Roselle Carter, and the distinguished College of Bishops and their spouses, and happy Ministerial Spouses Day to all spouses and widows throughout our Zion. Let me greet the chair of the CIT committee, Bishop James B. Walker and Mrs. Dolores Walker, and my bishop, Bishop Thomas Lewis Brown, Sr., and Dr. Louise Baker Brown as well. Now, let me tell you what happened this week. My computer just went out on me. I'm not claiming that it crashed, but it went out, okay? I think my computer said, I'm tired. I've had to do more work. I've had to do your virtual services, and then you want to do conversations in the afternoon, and you're loading up pictures and video and all of that kind of stuff. The computer said, I'm tired. I need a break. I'm taking a vacation. And so it did just that, but I'm on my iPad today. So if you see a few little glitches or something that is not working well, that's the reason why. But we're going to make it through and do the very best that we can. Last Sunday, we had an incredible conversation with some of our young millennials and Gen Xers. I played about a minute and 10-second clip and realized I had no permission, that it belonged to somebody else. And Facebook flagged it and pulled the show down in the midst on some of the channels. So that's what happened. So I want to just refute any conspiracy theories that some of you folks had, because they thought because the young preachers and pastors were all talking that the old head said pull it down. That did not that did not happen. But the show is available on the When We Were Colored page and the CME Facebook page. And now that Dr. Teresa Duhart, whom I think graciously is back from her week-long vacation in Hawaii, we'll try to get that out to you. But today we are blessed to have four servant leaders of many in this church. Let me say that emphatically, because there are a lot of preachers and pastors doing some excellent work today, and I hope to get to talk to them over the next year or so. We are still in our 150th year, all right? And so I hope to talk and have conversations up until the time of the general conference. But enough of my banter or rambling thoughts, as Bishop Marvin Frank Thomas would say. Let me bring my distinguished guest to the screen so that you can see them and hear from them as they come in from all parts of the United States. I think I have everybody in, and as soon as Dr. Shazetta Thompson-Hill's picture pulls up, let me introduce to you all, we have, and I hope I pronounced this right, is it Amariah?
Amariah.
Dr. Amariah McIntosh.
Amariah.
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 Amariah, who is the pastor of the Phillips Temple CME Church in Toledo, Ohio. We have Dr. Joseph Gordon, who is the senior pastor of Carter Temple CME Church, historic Carter Temple CME Church in Chicago, the Reverend Dr. Shazetta Thompson-Hill, the assistant pastor of Christian Chapel, Temple of Faith CME Church.
He'll be back.
Yeah, we've apparently. Oh, he's coming back in.
There we go.
I'm back. Y'all here?
There you go.
Yes, sir. We're here.
Okay, I'm here. That's the good thing about StreamYard. Even if I go out, you all stay on. Remember that. And we have the Reverend Dr. Reginald Walton, the pastor of Phillips Temple CME Church, Phoenix, Arizona. Let me say good afternoon, my brothers and sisters.
Good afternoon, my brother. Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon.
Glad to be in the numbers.
Good afternoon to all of you.
Thank you. I'm so delighted that you all are here. And before we begin, unmute yourselves for just a second. And I want to know, if you preached today, what did you preach on? Reverend Dr. McIntosh, did you preach today?
I did. I preached
about
Luke 18, the persistent widow who would not give up her cry for justice.
All right. Dr. Gordon, what did you preach on today?
Pastor, today was actually Women's Day. And so we had a special guest. Our guest preacher was Bishop Millicent Hunter of the Baptist Worship Center in Pennsylvania. And she preached, "I am a survivor." And I believe her text was Acts 14, 19 and 20. So she preached for us.
I am a survivor.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. So you had a paid vacation day today. I'm not mad at you, my brother.
Now, I was still there.
You were still there.
We had a hybrid of video and in the live. It was a whole thing, but I was still there. So I still get my check. So I'm just saying.
Amen, brother. Amen. Dr. Shazetta preached today.
I did not preach today. I am traveling here in Tennessee, visiting with my parents. And so again, if my Wi-Fi signal is acting funny, that's why. But I was not preaching on this Sunday. And so it was a Sunday for me to sit and to hear some other sermons being preached on today. So
good,
yes, sir.
Good for you. We need those praise. Dr. Walton, did you preach today? I think it was a church anniversary, right?
Today, we celebrated 112 years of ministry at the Phillips Memorial CME Church in Phoenix. I was privileged to be able to sit and in a week where I defended my doctoral dissertation. This was great that I did not have to preach. And so God providentally caused a friend of mine from here in the city of Phoenix. He'll be Dr. Terry Mackey on Tuesday, but he's the pastor of the Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church here. He shared a word from First Timothy. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. A relevant word for times like these. And so we're just thankful to God for what God has done.
Amen. Amen. So listen, we're going to jump right into our conversation today about this week's verdict, and the impact that it has had. And more importantly, what are you feeling as a preacher, as a pastor? What is going on in your sphere as you listen to the verdict, as you saw the outcome, as you have witnessed and experienced additional killings by the hand of the police? Just where are you right now in this moment? Dr. McIntosh.
I'm glad for the verdict. These kinds of verdicts were a long time coming, but I do not believe that verdict was justice. It was accountability of one police officer. There are 3 more who still have to face trial in that situation. But justice happens when we change our system, where all of us are seen not as threats that have to be put down, but are seen as human beings, seen like the guy who shot the people in the Atlanta area.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes police officers have to consider that maybe some of us are just having a bad day, and show us the kind of compassion that they show when they show up and there are white people who are shooting and are acting out of their minds. We want that same opportunity to be dealt with, and we can come away with it able to live to see another day.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Gordon, you are in an area.
Let me acknowledge my bishop while we're here.
Yes, please. Yes,
Bishop
please
Marvin
do.
Frank Thomas Sr., Second Episcopal District. We just want to acknowledge our presiding prelate. Thank you.
Absolutely. You are welcome. Thank you. Dr. Gordon, what are you feeling? You know, you're in Chicago, a city that has a history, if you will, in areas with police brutality and crime. What's going on in your sphere right now? What do you feel and how are you thinking right now?
You know, I concur with Dr. McIntosh just about this not being justice in a major sense in terms of justice. But I want to go back just for a moment to just talk about what Philip Goff called the absurdity of suspense. The fact that we even had to wait with bated breath for the obvious conviction, for the obvious and disgusting public lynching of to be this murderer to be convicted. The fact that we had to wait on it, even though everything was on camera, even though we saw everything, even though little children were able to name wrong and to name sin and to name the fact that something wasn't right. The fact that we even had to live in that suspenseful space to believe that he could still get off, because we've seen it so many times before. So again, I'm grateful for the accountability. It's not necessarily justice, but I am grateful for accountability. I also want to give a shout out to who really is a Detroit homeboy, Keith Ellison, who is the Attorney General, and I'm from Detroit for those who don't know, the Attorney General there in Minnesota, but also the power of protest, the power of continued activism, the power of people and the power of our voices. Because remember, when this first happened, when George Floyd was first murdered, there was a totally different narrative that came from the police there, that he had some type of quote unquote medical episode, but it was as a result of those faithful truth seekers who just refused to give up and refused to allow the truth to be buried. So again, it's not justice in the larger sense, because we have a ways to go, including some legislation, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment. But it is accountability, and we are grateful that sometimes it works. The justice system works, but we need to get to a place where there is equity, where it works for everybody equally, so that we don't have to wait again, as Goff said, with this living in this weird space of possibly not a conviction, even though everything is on camera. So, so I'm okay, but I'm not all the way there, if that makes sense.
I see. It makes a lot of sense. Dr. Shazetta, tell us your thoughts. Where are you in this moment as it relates to what you've seen and witnessed this week?
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Skip. So that my soror McIntosh doesn't outdo me, let me greet the 8th Episcopal District and the Senior Bishop of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, who also happens to be my presiding prelate, in the person of Senior Bishop Lawrence Lewis Reddick III. We honor your presence here today, sir. But I echo Dr. McIntosh and Dr. Gordon. Certainly, we're grateful for a verdict. I also think that it is sad that we had to wait with bated breath, as Dr. Gordon has said, wondering if there would be a guilty conviction, when clearly everything in front of us showed that Officer Chauvin committed the crime. I think that this is an interesting time for us to be the church. I think that as we continue to wait to see what sentencing will be, that we have a lot of questions to ask ourselves, particularly as we're coming now from being in the pandemic to considering what the post-pandemic church will look like. That as we look at stories of, let's say, Micaiah Bryant, for instance, who was killed just a few moments after or before the George Floyd verdict was passed down, that we have to ask ourselves questions: what systems are in place that continue to allow these things to take place? What systems outside of even poor policing and poor training are in place that allow for a young girl, 16-year-old girl, to find herself fighting for her life, and then a police officer having to make a split-second decision about whether or not he will end her life while she is defending it herself. I think we've got a lot of questions to ask ourselves about those sorts of things as we look at what our place is in this sort of justice system, as we look at it as the system, the circle of life, if you will, that it is, that we have to look and find where our place is. We can't just look, just as we cannot depend on the criminal justice system and the policing system to always bring about justice. We also can't wait for government and for legislation to be the sole agents for change. And so I think my mind has been in the place this week of where do we go from here as the church? How do we respond as the church in this moment to make sure that we also are doing the work of justice alongside the protesters, alongside the legislators and governmental leaders?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Thank you. Dr. Walton, same question to you. And I know you've been knee deep in writing, dissertation, defending, and all of that, but you certainly continue to be very active in your church work and community. Where are you in this moment right now?
Thank you so very much for having me, first and foremost, Dr. Mason. Secondly, let me greet my bishop, Bishop Paul A.G. Stewart, Sr. of the 9th Episcopal District, came out of retirement to serve, and we're just grateful for that. Now, with all of that being said, we are in the in-between. And what I mean by that, we're stuck between the tension of justice being served and ecstasy because it was finally served. This was, for many people, a reminder that the system does not always work for us. My generation came up in the shadow of the Rodney King decision, where we saw on videotape, and this was the first time that videotape was that evidence. It was evidence. We've been knowing that this had happened for generations, but this was the first time that the video evidence was there. And so when we saw the jury out of CME Valley come back with a not guilty verdict, and then we saw the riots. Okay, so here we are some 25, 30 years later, and we waited with bated breath as we saw a jury go and we saw not only a jury, but we saw a judge give instructions to a jury and give instructions to a defendant that maybe and perhaps there could be a mistrial because of what the great queen herself, Maxine Waters, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, simply said: we must be confrontational. And so what it does for me as a clergy person who also operates in the streets, it helps me to understand that the fight is not over, because if we give up this fight before sentencing happens, if we give up this fight, as we are currently in several states fighting against protest, the criminalization of protest, fighting against the voter suppression, as we're fighting against these things, we must fight the way that Jesus fought and continue to be countercultural, to continue to be counter empire. Because if we do not, then we are as guilty as the ones who crucified Jesus and as the ones who murdered George Floyd in the street.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd like for you all to talk about your personal relationship, your theology, and what is God doing in this moment, and how have you been able to take that and convey it to the people that you work with, your parishioners, people who may be seeking or looking to you for some understanding of the moment? How have you been able to manage that from a spiritual perspective? How is it informing you as a preacher, pastor, public theologian, public intellectual? How's it inform you? And anybody can jump in at this time.
Before anybody jumps in, says y'all all did it and I did not do it. And thank you, by the way, for doing that. Of course, I appreciate it. But I certainly want to show love to our Bishop Sylvester Williams, Lady Carmen Williams, 3rd Episcopal District. God bless you all. Thank you for sharing today, because I felt the letter being written as y'all kept going. So I just wanted to get that in there. But also I want to. I've grown to a place, let me say it like this. I've grown to a place over this last year of what it means to name sin. And one preacher once said, sin is the one thing we all have in common, but we don't like to talk about it, right? But what does it mean for us to name sin? And we understand, certainly theologically, biblically, that sin is the result of living in a fallen world. But I think over this past year, and really over these past few years, we've graduated to a place of being able. I've seen young people naming racism as sin, naming white supremacy as sin, naming these police shootings as sin. And so what do we do in the face of sin? We work righteousness. We work justice. And so I think it was T.D. Jakes I heard say that America is an ideal, not a reality. And so since we're living in a fallen world, we have to certainly deal with America's initial first original sin, certainly slavery, because everything that's happening really is a result of slavery. It really is. When you really think about the fact that an officer is more likely to shoot a person of color than a white person. I mean, that really harkens back to the days of slavery and almost looking at us as if we should not be free. We should not be liberated. And so being able to name sin, but also at the same time working and developing intentional, relevant ministries, because what we've done in the midst of the pandemic was really look for opportunity for ministry in the midst of the pandemic. All hope is not lost. We don't have to curse the pandemic, but really look for the opportunity to name opportunities of sin, name what sin looks like, but also to look for opportunities to work in the midst of a fallen world. So you got to be flexible, you got to be pliable, but at the same time, call sin what it is.
What it is. Yes, indeed. And before you come, Reggie, hold on one second. I just want to share with Dr. Gordon a couple of things that Bishop Reddit wrote. After you finally acknowledged your bishop, we knew it was coming.
I knew it. If I had some water, I pour it over my head. I'm sorry. I cool myself off.
Right. Well, that's okay. You didn't have to preach today. You just had to listen, and that takes a lot out of it. We understand.
Now, I'm gonna do something, then all the rest of y'all are gonna have to do it. That's how we're gonna play this game. So
that's how we gonna play.
I got something for you.
Yeah.
Oh man, hilarious! I love it. But one of the things that I would recommend that everyone who is serious about the work, who is serious about pastoring, take a look at Dr. Aubrey Hendricks Jr.'s book, The Politics of Jesus, Rediscovering the True Revolutionary Nature of Jesus' Teachings and How They Have Been Corrupted. He's got an entire section talking about call the demon by name. And if we are really going to reach the masses, we cannot be cute. We've got to call sin and institutional sin what it is. The governor of the state of Arizona cannot stand me because he had a meeting with black pastors. And we simply asked him, Governor, say that you stand against institutional racism. The governor came back and said, I don't believe that institutional racism exists. He says, I believe racism exists, but I don't believe that institutional racism exists. And so he got mad when I said, if you cannot say that, then you don't deserve to be the leader of this state. And I told him point blank, I'll do whatever it takes. That if you feel like you want to go higher, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that you get knocked out in the primary. That's just the reality of it. And so we've got to be bold enough and brave enough to get out of our pulpits, and even in our pulpits, start naming institutional sin. We love to deal with individual sin. But until we really get like the Old Testament prophets and start to call corporate sin what it is, and really beg that we repent for our corporate sin, then we're really doomed. And really, if you look through the Old Testament, it wasn't individual sin that doomed Israel. It was corporate sin and their unwillingness to admit. And until the United States admits that our original sin of racism, our original sin of segregation, our original sin of slavery, then we're going to be cursed. And we're going to be cursed with a curse. And I don't care what anybody says, we're going to be cursed. And God does not bless mess.
Yes, sir. Dr. Shazetta?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I am excited, particularly about this question. I've been wrestling in my own work, kind of around this notion of theology. So I want to start there. We all have at some point or another, really since Trayvon Martin, certainly moving into Michael Brown, Eric Garner, that group, begun hearing, and some of us having dialogue around the theology of presence. But the place where I've been wrestling in my own work, my own thinking and reading and writing is about where the theology of the church is around that. And so the theology of the church, meaning the church universal. I'm not speaking denominationally or with regard to any particular denomination. And so I think in the same spirit of what my brothers have said in naming sin, I think that we have to again turn the lens back toward ourselves as the church, as the representatives of Christ on earth, and say to ourselves, what is the sin within our own selves that we are failing to call out? And I think that one of those things is that rather than having adopted a theology of presence as a majority, that we have adopted a theology of absence, right? And this is where my work is focusing, that we have, as the church, by and large, adopted a theology of absence, where we are going to pray and that's all, or where we're going to look and we're going to dissect, we're going to blame, we're going to call out the original sin of government, of our country, of our nation, of police departments, of law enforcement, of the justice system. But we refuse again to look back at the places, or to look at the places where we also are complicit in this sin that is running rampant right in the earth. And I think that is a place where, as the church, yes, we have to call out. I am among the biggest advocates of all of speaking truth to power, but we also have to look at ourselves as being sitting in seats of power. I was in one meeting some years ago back in Ferguson, and there was a young lady there on the ground who referred to us as pastors. She said, "You all don't realize it, but you too walk in church privilege." And that changed for me. It changed the way that I looked at some things, because for those of us who, in Black church in particular, who look at ourselves as being a part of an oppressed group, and look at the other, particularly those who are white or of a lighter hue, of a lighter hue, and say that they are the ones who are privileged. She, as a young Black woman, looked at us and said, "You are speaking from a place of church privilege." And so if we're going to call out sin, we got to call it all out, even when we ourselves are those who are the sinners, who are the perpetuators of this sin. And so when we look at this place of theology, we've got to look and see the places where we have been in error. I can't tell you, and Dr. Walton can attest to this, the number of leaders, of pastors, of just good old lay folk Christians who said to us, "God hasn't called us to be in the street. God has just called me to pray. God has just called you to preach.
My Lord.
I'm not going to support you being in." That is a theology of absence, and it is anti-Christ in every way. Right? We see Christ sitting down with thieves. We see Christ sitting down with tax collectors. We see him running to be out and among and to stand with. But somehow we, the church, are not responsible for that anymore. That's a theology that we no longer feel like as if we should subscribe to. And that is a sin that we've got to call out, that we've got to own up to, or I think we're just walking in hypocrisy. So that is the place of my wrestle, has been the place of my wrestle the last few weeks.
Theology of absence. My goodness. Reverend Dr. McIntosh, chime in.
You know, I think historically, we go back to when the church became legitimate in the mind and in the power of the empire or the state. And so too often the church has now become an agent of the empire because we seek from the empire. I recall when I served in Evansville, Indiana, and went to a budget meeting of the city council. And all of these clergy who were there seeking to have the money that they got from the city to be included in their budgets. And I looked at my lead organizer of the justice organization there in Evansville, and I said, that's why we can't get them to join us when we seek to challenge the mayor, the city council, the county commissioners to make life better for our neighborhoods, because they're too invested in receiving from the same power. So when you're getting it, you're not likely to speak against it.
Yeah.
And I agree with my colleagues. We have gotten too into our personal piety. I don't know how we can praise effectively when in our neighborhoods, especially some of us where our churches are in the very neighborhoods, where our people are meeting with negative situations with the police department. And we go in, get our praise on, lock the doors, get in our cars, and go back to our comfortable lives and neighborhoods. And we forget about the struggle, and then we become reactive rather than proactive.
So my question then, great scholars and thinkers, where do we go from here? I think I heard Dr. Shazetta mention that phrase, and I think we all are in agreement that there is an abundance of theology of absence in all of our churches across the land. So moving from looking at what we know are the issues and problems, where do we go from here first, individually, as pastors, and as a church and community? Because I know the people are listening, and pastors are listening. And it could very well be some pastors just don't know what to do. They don't know what to do, and they don't know how to do it. So please, brothers and sisters, offer some solutions, if you will, or some thoughts as to where do we go from here, and especially in the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. Anybody?
So, Dr. Mason, one of the things that Emmanuel Lartey does is he gives functions of pastoral care. He gives the healing function, he gives the sustaining function, he gives the guiding function, the reconciling function, the nurturing, and then the liberating function, then the empowering function. And so as pastors, I believe that we've got to understand where we are. Because if we do not, Bishop Lakey is the first person I heard say it this way, that pastors need to read their Bible, but also read the newspaper. And so if we're not understanding that we must be contemporary and address the issues in our community, like Brother Burton says, then we're lost. But as a church, I believe that connectionally we need to have a sit-down meeting and really talk about the issues that are plaguing our communities. Case in point, I'm on the West Coast. I don't know if your neighborhood is going through what my neighborhood is going through, but my neighborhood used to be the historically Black neighborhood. Now it's no longer predominantly Black. Now it is a commuter neighborhood. So we've got to address that the church, the landscape of the neighborhood is changing. Secondly, we've got to also understand that our populace is getting older. And there are some people that have said and point blank told me, Pastor, I love what you're doing, but my knees can't handle being out there marching. I'm too old. I got to take medicine on a schedule. You get what I'm saying? And so we've got to have these conversations. Then we've got to talk about how are we going to, are we effective, or are we going to be effective in how we address? And so we've got to provide the care. We've got to have real conversations, and we've got to look at what we do, how we do, why we do. It's also amazing that we've got to look at our turnaround. It does not make sense to my young people, and I had some of my younger people ask me this, Pastor, why is it when something happens, it takes our church forever to address it? And I'm thankful to our College of Bishops for taking the time to address it. But sometimes by the time that they address one issue, another one has popped up. And so we've got to take a look at how we move, the speed in which we move, and how we really address what's going on, so that we're not being reactive all of the time, that we're not being proactive some of the time, and that sometimes we're just late to the party.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Next, anyone else? Dr. Gordon.
Part of what it will take, and I think part of what we're discovering.
Did we lose him?
Okay. No, I'm here. I don't know what happened. Okay. We have to be willing to listen. I think we've lost that. Certainly, we have to regain trust, because there are so many who are between the ages of 18 and 35 who just don't trust the church anymore. You find study after study that says, yes, I'm spiritual, but I'm not churchy necessarily. We're also living in this age of nons, where so many persons have no religious identification. And we have to look at ourselves introspectively to say, well, why have people left the church? Why are people running away from the church? What perspectives are we missing? Do we view church as structure versus movement? Because we know that in this justice age, people are looking and tethering themselves to those things that are movements as opposed to just individual structures. I think, again, going back to Dr. Thompson-Hill, this whole concept of a theology of absence, I think it goes to the nature of sometimes the church hiding behind the cross. And I know we often say that when we get ready to preach, hide me behind thy cross. But the Lord is saying, no, you can't hide behind this cross no more. You got to carry your cross. You got to carry your cross for the sick. You got to carry your cross for the naked. You got to carry your cross for the poor. You got to carry your cross for those who are lost, left out, left behind, the least of these. Yeah. So again, we got to shift from a mindset of just simply spirituality for the sake of spirituality. Don't vilify activists, because I think churches over the last 2 or 3 years really have vilified activists, where you have Black Lives Matter on one side, the church on the other, and then you have just a tiny space in between that we're all trying to fit into. No, we have to partner, tether ourselves, because when all is said and done, whether it's Black Lives Matter or whatever other movement you're talking about, if it's on the side of justice, if it's on the side of the people of God, we can partner, but we have to be willing to listen. And the only way that we're going to regain the trust of this generation is being willing to listen, that we might become a movement together and not isolated structures separately.
Lord, I definitely agree. Hide me behind the cross again. My goodness.
No, you can't hide behind the cross no more.
You can't hide.
This is bad theology, Dr. Skip.
That's a colloquial saying
Yeah, we've been doing it for so long.
We've been saying it for so long. You done messed me
We
up
have.
with that, but
Right.
I'm
Yes,
good.
yes.
Yeah, somebody else chime in,
Yes.
please.
Yes, that's just look. I agree with Dr. Gordon. That's just bad theology. Hide me behind the cross. No,
Bad
no, no,
theology.
no, no,
Yeah.
no. Bad theology. So listen. I am definitely in agreement with what the brothers have said as we consider now ourselves what it is, how we begin moving towards solutions. Dr. Skip, I think we have to begin preparing ourselves for what it will mean to be the post-pandemic church, right? And we're not post-pandemic yet. We're getting close, prayerfully. For all of us, y'all go get your vaccines, right? Get it right in there. But go get your vaccines, But as we move toward being the post-pandemic church, we've got to prepare ourselves because just as Dr. Gordon has said, that there is a generation, really probably more than one, ours and then the one that's coming immediately behind us, who does not necessarily feel the same commitment or need to be committed to the institution of the church, although they do feel a call and they see the importance of relationship with God, with Jesus Christ, and with Holy Spirit, right? And so we've got to position ourselves, begin preparing ourselves, and this is really a mental and emotional preparation for ourselves as pastor and as church, because as we come out of this pandemic, the church, the post-pandemic church, must prepare itself for a heavy season of critique, right? People are going to have questions about where the church has been during the pandemic, right? We had questions before the pandemic, certainly, but people are going to have very real questions about where the church has been during the pandemic, where we have been during George Floyd, where we have been during Breonna Taylor, where we are during Ma'Khia Bryant. The church, people are going to have very real questions of the church. And if the church takes the position that the church has long taken, that you can't ask us nothing, that don't, get somewhere, sit down, you can't question us, you can't challenge us, the church is going to die as the church as we know it will no longer be. Right. And so to begin this work, as Dr. Gordon said, we've got to first name the sin. We've got to acknowledge that we ourselves are the perpetuators of some of those sins. But then we've got to prepare ourselves, humble ourselves, if you will, for the critique that is coming and be willing to listen to that critique and then make changes according to it. I think it was one of your guests who said last week that they appreciated their bishop. I think it was Reverend Zachary Mullins, who said that conversations with his Bishop Sylvester Williams aren't just conversations, but they are conversations that yield change. And so as these young people, as we would call them, as we have coined them, the unchurched or some of the church, come and begin to challenge the church as it is, church has got to be willing and ready, prepared to listen and then to respond with humility, but also respond with a willingness to change. Our church, denominationally, but the church in general, will not be able to go back to pre-pandemic practices in post-pandemic times. It's just not going to work. And so I think that is one place where we have to begin to recognize that there is going to be some reckoning that's going to take place, right? In this next several months, weeks, and years, certainly, that there are going to be some real questions that are asked, that there's going to be some accountability as we see who has gotten this governmental assistance that Dr. McIntosh brought up, as we see that you have gotten help, but you've not extended help to the people in your congregations. And so there are going to be some questions that we've got to answer, right? But we're going to have to humble ourselves and be willing to answer those in truth, because if we don't, what we say that is untrue will be brought out in the light, and it'll be done quickly and swiftly in this age of technology and social media.
It's
Dr. Joe, you want to chime in?
Just really quickly. So just as you were speaking, from Laquan McDonald to all the way to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, the church is being exposed, is what's happening. So the church is being exposed. And so, because the ultimate question is this: who do we stand for and who do we stand with? And so in these times, these challenging, difficult times, who are we standing with? So they know who we stand for. They ideally know we stand for Jesus, right? But who are we standing with? That is the question of our age, because again, we were exposed when George Floyd got killed, and when Laquan McDonald got killed, when so many other Black and brown bodies were taken away from us, the church more and more got exposed. And we have to get to a place, and I thank Dr. Shazetta for this. Inquiry is not sin. when the world is looking at the church and asking questions, not simply about our effectiveness, but asking who we stand with, we cannot name, as much as we want to name a whole lot of other stuff as sin, inquiry about the church's effectiveness, the church's mission post-pandemic, and in the midst of pandemic, inquiry is not sin. So again, we've been exposed. We have to be willing to listen, answer those hard questions, but also when all is said and done, name who we stand with, not just who we stand for.
We also have to remember that there are communities, faith-based in communities that are doing the work and have been doing the work for years. And when they call us, we need to stop making excuses as to why we cannot involve ourselves. I don't care how long your appointment is. Make it count where you are. And I mean, every place I've been in the last 20 years, I have been involved and have included my local churches in involvement in the communities in which we reside. To know what is happening in our neighborhoods, what's happening in our communities, just because it doesn't affect you personally, does not mean it's not affecting your members. Just because they don't tell you doesn't mean, and again, it's because of the lack of trust and faith in the church, why our own members are not always honest with us about what's going on. But all of our communities have some kind of social justice or some kind of advocacy that's been happening, and we need to commit our local churches to being involved so that we can be taught and trained on how to ask the questions, how to understand that confrontation, as Representative Maxine Waters says. We've been taught as Christians we have to be nice and meek and humble and mild. That's not how it works. We've got to confront, like the prophets of old, we've got to stand before Pharaoh. We've got to stand before kings. We've even got to stand before the corrupt institution known as the church and call it out for what it has done wrong and lead it in what to do right.
Dr. McIntosh, I have to jump in. Someone put in the chat that the isms are being exposed.
Yes,
and so if we are going to be who God has called us to be, we've got to call out the racism. We do a good job of calling out the racism, but we've got to call out the sexism. We've got to call out all of the isms. The ageism, we've got to call that out. And not only do we have to call it out, but we've got to take an introspective look. I call it the gospel of Michael Jackson, because we've got to take a look at the man or woman in the mirror, because how have we played a part? How have we played a part in the detriment of our people? How have we played a part in the detriment of our young people? How have we played a part in the alienation of our communities? Because we love to say, oh, come as you are, until people come as they are.
That's right.
Come as you are, unless you smell the high heavens. And if you smell the high heavens, then we're going to put you on the back pew, and you better not come up on us. Come as you are.
Or saying gender loving, yes. Or classism, or those who are on welfare or who have lost their jobs, and even those who are not born in this country. We have issues with Hispanics. We have issues with Asians. We have issues with others. This is not who we are called to be. And yes, we've got to reckon. We've got to turn, as they said, turn the searchlight on ourselves.
Or we value you. I'm sorry, Dr. Skip, very quickly. Or we value you as much because you can pay your claims or your assessment. But
That's
if you
it.
cannot pay your claims or assessment, I'm not coming to service you. I'm not coming to pray with you. I'm not coming to be with you. We've got to really take a look and examine ourselves.
I'm not even willing to fight for you. That's right.
Exactly. And we've got to take an examination of ourselves and really say, hey, how can we be made better? And Father, forgive us for we have sinned.
So I
But you
want
can tell
all
those
of
old
you.
people in your congregation, they may not be able to march, but they can pick up telephones and they can call and they can email and they can write letters. And we all must be registered and participate in the process from the top of the ticket down to the bottom of the ticket.
I want you all to respond to this. Bishop Othel Hawthorne Lakey. He said, are you saying that Officer Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck is the fault of the CME Church? And let me say hello to Bishop Lakey. On the first anniversary of my show, you were my first guest, and I'm delighted that he watches every Sunday and typically shares an email or a thought. But I'm glad that this one popped up. Give me your thoughts on this question. We're listening.
No.
And you understand.
Everybody's
we're saying that.
Hold on, Dr. McIntosh.
Okay.
And you all understand the context of the question, okay, as it relates to the CME Church at large. Go ahead, Dr. McIntosh.
I was saying, no, I don't believe that that's what we're saying. We're talking about systemic sin and racism and sexism that has built up over time. It is a system that says white people are better than Black people, that white people say that Black people are not human. And I believe that's at the core of George Floyd's death. This white police officer does not regard him as human. And even when he's continually saying, I can't breathe, this police officer does not believe that. No, it's not the fault of the church for that one particular act, but how the Christian church, especially the Western Christian church, has framed its faith and practices around race plays a big part. Because a lot of these guys who are shooting up other folk belong to some faith tradition. They go to church on Sunday. They sing in the choir. They go to Bible study. No, I don't believe that it is our fault that George Floyd was killed. The rest of y'all, come on, jump in here.
Well, no, I mean, part of it goes to, again, the problem of policing. And I know we really haven't had a conversation about that today too much, but I mean, we really have to come to terms with that. And understanding also that the problems of policing are not only problems of department policy and behavior, but it's really the result of our collective failure to value the full value and dignity of Black life. And I think what we're saying is until the nation fully reckons with this foundational sin, whatever that reckoning might look like, we'll be forced over and over again to be subjected to all of these different types of situations in our own fractured communities, no matter where we find ourselves. So again, there's a problem with policing in this country, but there's also a problem with the valuation of Black life, policing and the valuation of Black life.
So until we repent from the support of the omnibus crime bill, until we repent from the support of the 10-to-1 sentencing disparity, it's not the CME Church's fault, but we've got some repenting to do, because we supported the militarization of our police. We supported calling our babies. Now, understand this, our children and our grandchildren that we love so much, we supported people that called them super predators. And we were calling them super predators too. Until Reverend Chauvins Jackson preached a sermon a few years ago at Pastors Conference, and it talked about the young man that fell out of the window. The young man was in the church, but the church allowed the young man to fall out of the window. My brothers and sisters, it's not the CME Church's fault, but we've allowed some of our people to fall out of the window. And we've supported policies that have incarcerated our people. We've supported policies and politicians that have criminalized our people. And then we said, oh Lord, what are us supposed to do? Instead of us being proactive and saying we've been guilty and we've been complicit, then we want to throw the rock and hide our hand. We've got to figure out who we are, and that's what the exposure is. People are exposing the church because they understand that the church has been right there with these politicians. The church has been right there supporting these policies. The church has been right there. We'll go to pray for our people when they get incarcerated, but why are we supporting the politics, the politicians, the policies, and the people that are incarcerating our people? That's what the frustration is with this current generation of social justice leaders with the church, because the church has been silent, or the church has been complicit with what's been going on.
But not always.
If I can jump in here,
okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. If I can jump in here real quick.
I just want to share that when Bishop Lake was my bishop in the Second Episcopal District, when Clarence Thomas was up to be confirmed as a Supreme Court justice, Bishop Lakey wrote a letter to the senators of the states represented in the Second Episcopal District. Now, how long ago that was? But he wrote a letter to those senators saying to them most emphatically why he and the Second Episcopal District did not want Clarence Thomas to be confirmed to the Supreme Court. So it might be a little unfair for us to say that over the history that our church has done nothing, because we really had. We remember Bishop Lindsay, who marched with Dr. King. We remember was Pastor Douglas, who just passed away not too long ago.
Right.
Yes. Right. And so historically, the CME Church has done its necessary work.
But Dr. McIntosh, I want to push back on that. Then we're going to bring Dr. Shazetta in.
Okay.
But we're talking about a present age right now.
Yes.
Okay. We can run the historical canon of things that we've done, and no one loves history more than me, Bishop Lakey, Dr. Somerville, and others, Dr. Jermaine Marshall, and all. But we're talking about right now, in this moment. And I think that's what we need to address. And it could very well be, and Dr. Shazetta, you chime in, sometime as we are training pastors, we may not be training them on how to confront and get into the fight. Okay, we train them on church work, you know, but community work is a whole different teaching and lesson. And I'm just convinced that there are pastors who may not necessarily be lazy, as someone stated. They just may not know or understand how to get into the fight, and they need training on that. Dr. Shazetta, would you chime in?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you, Bishop Blakey, for the question. I don't recall prior to now, any of us bringing up specifically the CME Church, but since now the question has been put forth, let's deal with it. If indeed the CME Church considers ourselves to be a part of the church in general, if indeed the CME Church believes itself to be a part of the community, then I think, yes, we do have to begin to ask the question of the part that we play. What part do we play in the fault that was a George Floyd? Were we, Derek Chauvin, with our knee on George Floyd's neck? No, but we do have to ask our question, but whose neck do we have our knee on? We cannot choose to be a part of the church at the times when it is convenient or comfortable for us. We cannot choose to be a part of community at the time when it is convenient for us. The CME Church, if it is a part of the church universal, if it is a part of the community, if it chooses to be a part of government and politics, then we've got to ask ourselves the question, that right there specifically might not be our fault, but what is our fault? And we can look out among our congregations, we can look within the communities that wherein we are situated, and we can look and see the things that are our fault. We can look and see the things that we have chosen to walk over, that we have chosen to ignore. What could we have done that we chose not to? What did we see that we chose to make an intentional effort to unsee? Reginald Walton has thrown out some very intentional things that we supported, but somehow for us, it was not sin. We can't ask, right, police and government to name their sins and to deal with theirs if we're unwilling to deal with ours. By allowing ourselves to get caught up in the technicalities of whose fault was each individual thing, then we set ourselves up for failure. We set ourselves up to, again, we do the comfortable and convenient work of allowing ourselves to escape accountability. Here is what I believe, and I believe it with everything in me, that when we choose to say, we allow ourselves to begin to nitpick, because that is what it is, to nitpick the things for which we are not responsible, we allow ourselves to escape accountability. And since Dr. Gordon said it, let's name it. That is sin. We've got to begin to acknowledge the places where we as the church, and yes, the CME Church, since you called it, continue to fail on a daily, weekly, monthly, quadrennial basis. We are failing a generation. We are failing a community because we are so stuck on, well, that right there ain't my fault, because we're busy being good church folk. Good church folk, y'all. Good church folk. Dr. Mason, you invite the fullness of who I am. Good church folk will bust the gates of hell wide open, because we are failing to do the basics of taking care of the orphans, of taking care of the widows, of doing the work of justice. We are failing. And so, no, was our knee on George Floyd's neck? But our knees are on the neck of some pastors. Our knees are on the neck of some communities. Our knees are on the neck of some generations within our denomination. So no, was that our fault? Absolutely no, sir. I say it with all the respect in my heart and soul, and that's a whole lot if you know anything about me. But we cannot get caught up in the technicality of what is not the fault of the CME Church. The CME Church has got to begin to ask, but what is our fault? But what can we do? But what have not we done? And we have to begin the work of true repentance so that we can begin moving forward. Because I think on one of your very early shows, it was Dr. Cheryl Kirk-Dugan who said, Dr. Mason, I'm not sure we'll be here in 10 years. So when in 2 general conferences, will we be having a general conference, or will we be putting the church on hospice care? These are the real questions we have to ask ourselves as we deal with the generation who is asking, where is this church that y'all keep preaching to me about? And I echo, I honor what you said, Dr. Sora McIntosh, about what the church has done. But I echo what Dr. Mason said. This ain't about what we did. This is about what we gonna do. And if we ain't gonna do nothing, we need to just sit down, shut up, close the doors, and keep it moving. We wasting time, money, and resources. And I believe somewhere in one of our rituals said we shouldn't trifle away time in more than one place longer than what is necessary. What the equivalent of this is for me.
So it sounds like Dr. Shazetta Thompson-Hill, and that's why I have you on, because last Sunday she was writing dissertations in the comment section. And I said, who is this sister? I got to have her on the show immediately. No, you raised some wonderful, powerful points, and this is a safe space. And I'm glad that everybody feels comfortable to share. And we do appreciate that question from Bishop Lakey. So it sounds like our conversation then has to shift not only today, but as a church on what does the post-pandemic church look like? All right, because we cannot come back to the pre-pandemic church. We just cannot come back to that. Dr. Gordon, you are, and I want all of you all, I think, by way of sharing a little bit about yourself, talk about your own personal engagement in the community and the things that you've done. I know, Dr. Shazetta, you've done a documentary as a way of documenting and teaching, you know, and Dr. McIntosh, you are knee deep, you know, in the community. Dr. Gordon, I know what you're doing. That's why you were selected. Okay. So talk about what you're doing and how does your post-pandemic church look?
Yeah, so there for us at the beginning of the pandemic, one of the things we discovered was that now I'm going to be completely honest. I didn't know what this COVID-19 virus was all about. If I was anywhere, I was probably wearing masks before they told us to put on masks. I'm just being honest with you, because I wasn't fooling around with people, and I know a whole lot of us were in close proximity, and I can appreciate that and I can celebrate that. But there were still some things that I had to find out for myself. But one of the things that we discovered in this season was that as this pandemic was hitting, it was actually hitting people's lives in a very hard way. And one of the ways that it was hitting people in a very hard way was financially. And so we had conversation with our leaders here at the church, and we said, you know what? God has blessed us to a degree that in addition to all of the other benevolence and outreach that we do, we instituted a grant program. And it wasn't a grant program just for members of the church, but it was for persons in the community and small businesses, to where we were giving away $500 grants, $1,000 grants, doing our very best to try to meet people's needs, because that's what we saw. I can't speak for y'all in Phoenix or in Texas, but in Chatham, in Chicago, people had real financial needs. And so we did our best to meet as many of those needs as we could. One of the other things that we discovered was that ongoing testing was needed. And so we were making sure that we partnered with organizations, partnered with hospitals to ensure that we were not only giving away masks and having those types of things, PPE available, but we're also making sure that persons were getting tested. And in the midst of all of this, I've discovered that as a pastor, you have to have a level of flexibility, a level of pliability, if you will, a dexterity, if you will. And so we've discovered that this hybrid ministry model in church, in person, in church, online, one church, two locations, call it whatever you want, it's here to stay. So how do we maximize ministry, and how do we make ministry meaningful through relevant conversation, through outreach activity, using both digital and in-person formats? So those are the types of things that we were doing. But in all that we were doing as Carter Temple, we were doing our very best to try to meet people's needs, but also to help our congregation to embrace the hard conversations that come with social justice, that come with police brutality. And what we're doing in the next couple of months is that we're going to have lamentation time. We're going to have grieving sessions, because we discovered, just from a pastoral care standpoint, that grief has been disrupted. And if grief has been disrupted as a pastor, it's hit me so hard not being able to be present with persons in the midst of their grief. And so over the next month or so, we're going to have some grieving sessions for persons who have lost their loved ones, to help them process what it looks like, to process what life must be now. So ministry, whereas it must be geared toward social justice must be geared toward not just honoring the institution, but actually meeting the needs of people and meeting them where they are, and dealing with wholeness and healing in more ways than one, both justice as well as emotional.
Wonderful. Wonderful, Dr. Gordon. Thank you so much. Dr. McIntosh, what does your post-pandemic church look like?
My post-pandemic church will continue when we go back into the building. And we have learned that the building is not the church. But we will continue our virtual worship simultaneously with in-person worship. We're looking at, we still, even during the pandemic, we do still have a monthly commodities giveaway. We had to move it outside. And then in the wintertime, we just had to adjust how we delivered it, but we still make sure that our folk are fed. I'm part of a interdenominational ministerial alliance that does provide small grants for individuals and churches that are in need, as well as at one point, I opened up the church since we had Wi-Fi, so that students who had to do virtual school could come to the church and put on their computers and do their classwork. I arranged with the school district to deliver the lunches to them. But now everybody's back in the building, still working on a state level with the Ohio Council of Churches on an advocacy committee to make sure that our state legislators and representatives keep our neighborhoods and our communities and our people in mind. But we are still the church, because again, the door of the church did not close, just the doors of the building. I know there are some who can't wait to get back in, but on the other hand, a lot of my aging congregation have learned Zoom and have learned conference calling. And I don't think they're in any rush to come back into the building, because now they don't have to dress, they don't have to get their hair done, they don't have to go to the barbershop. Yeah, they can just turn their cameras off and still be a part of the community.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Dr. Shazetta, tell us about what the post-pandemic church looked like in your community and what you're doing to address some of the concerns and what you've done. Particularly, tell us about your documentary as well. Unmute yourself.
There we go. I was muted. I'll start first with the local church. I'm blessed to serve at Christian Chapel Temple of Faith there in Dallas, Texas, under the able and visionary leadership of Reverend Dr. Venice J. Burns. And so as she has taken to saying here recently, we just continue to do what we do. And that may seem simple for those who may not know her, but we joke and say that she's a slave driver, forces us to make bricks without straw. But Dr. Duhart really said it well, that we have continued to pivot really since the very, very beginning. I remember when we first heard the COVID shutdowns, our core team standing out in the vestibule or the lobby area, socially distanced with our masks on, saying, okay, what we gonna do, because we're not gonna miss a Sunday. And us beginning then as a team of 6 to really decide, okay, we're going to be the core team. We're large enough to social distance. We're going to put all these things into play. And that core team just kind of began to grow as the spacing would allow. And so we began by meeting those immediate needs in the community by of course, continuing our services. Streaming, we had been doing that for a while, but also then beginning to figure out how we address the needs of our senior members, of course, through Zoom. Now even our oldest member, she's 92 years old, is able to navigate Facebook, Zoom, YouTube, WhatsApp, whatever you need her to get. Mother Love is able to get on. and do just fine with communion. For those, we did parking lot communion. And then for those who could not come out, we went and did door-to-door delivery, dropped it in the mailbox, ring the doorbell and run to make sure they get it for our elders. And for those who are high risk, we continue to provide meals in the community, drive through, we called it Feed the Masses, to drive through, and they would come through and get those meals. And so we've continued to keep our ear to the heartbeat of the community. We've continued to ask Holy Spirit to reveal to us what is the next, so that we didn't get comfortable and complacent in what we were doing. And as we've done that, we found that the church members, the members at Christian Chapel, have galvanized around us financially. As Dr. McIntosh has said, those who said what they couldn't do, we say, okay, you can't do that, but this is what you can do. And they've all risen to the occasion every single time. And as leadership has cast a vision for us, we run with it. And we expect to continue to do that post-pandemic, and for God to continue to show us how to pivot, how to change, how to adjust, so that we continue to meet the needs and the needs of men and women with the changing of times. Now, with regard to my own personal work, I've been blessed to adjunct at Colgate, Rochester, a Divinity school there in Rochester, New York. And just a couple of weeks ago now, they premiered my documentary film called Presence, which was the culmination of my D-Min work at Perkins School of Theology. And this film, over 2 hours, features our own Senior Bishop, Lawrence Reddick, features Senior Bishop John Bryant, now retired Senior Bishop John Bryant, Pamela Lightsey, Evelyn Parker, a number of other scholars, some activists there on the street. But it looks at the work, the presence and or absence, if you will, of the Black Methodist body, of three of the historic Black Methodist bodies, I should say. That is to say, CME, AME, and AME Zion churches during the Ferguson protests. And we looked at what it means, what it is that we proclaim or preach in our absence, in our silence, even when we're not standing behind pulpits. And so I'm really excited about that work. It's been several years now in the making. So I hope that you all will go and grab that and have a look, and certainly leave some reviews and give me some honest feedback on that. But moving forward, I hope to continue doing that work. I hope to continue shifting and looking at what it is that God is calling me to do as an individual, first of all, but also looking toward how God is calling me to be a part of the larger church as we continue to be all that God is desiring for us to be.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Dr. Walton, what does the post-pandemic church look like for you up in the Phoenix, Arizona area?
Thank you so much. I want to read something that Bishop Joseph Johnson wrote in the 1970s. He said, "We must provide a ministry of confrontation to the social ills in our world. We must provide a ministry of liberation and reconciliation. We believe," then he goes to say that the local church must take its rightful place in the vanguard of the Black Revolution, and then that the local church must utilize the potential of its young people. And we must feel grateful that God has permitted us to render this distinctive service to this unique generation of young Black Americans. So for me, Phillips Memorial will continue to do the work, and that's in Bishop Johnson's basic Christian Methodist beliefs. For me, here in Phoenix, we'll continue to do the work of justice. I was one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement here in Phoenix, Arizona, back in 2013, late in 2013. And so we've continued doing that work. I've stepped back. I'm getting a little bit older, and so that's a young person's game. And so we handed leadership over to a younger group of people. And so I'm proud of that work. We continue to stream. We began streaming in 2015, and people said, "Why are you doing so?" I said, "You never know who you're going to reach." And so now at this very moment, we reach people all across the nation and indeed around the world through our live streams. Then we continue to partner with several of the churches here. We have a group called the African American Christian Clergy Coalition, which is a consortium of over 100 historic Black churches here in the Valley. I serve as the chair of civic engagement. And so whenever there's something to dealing with civic engagement, they come to me. From all of the political activists and political office holders, from the city level all the way to the federal level. As a church, we will continue to provide continue to provide meals. We'll continue to provide clothes through our clothing closet. We are looking to, once we open back up, to partner again with one of the groups that we've been partnering with. Matter of fact, we began that partnership 5 years ago. Actually, 5 years ago this weekend, Bishop Teresa Snorton was our guest preacher, and they came to present this program in our morning service. And it's called The Streets Don't Love You Back. It's a gang prevention program. And so we decided, it was so good, we decided during that service 5 years ago to partner with them. And I'm unconventional. And so we held church conference in the middle of church service in order to get that done. But that's what the church looks like. Continue to impact people at their point of need. And also one of the things that I'm looking at is I'm looking to learn Spanish myself and to also begin to see if I can find a Spanish-speaking pastor who wants to come into the CME church, because our community is becoming Spanish-speaking. And so we got to serve this present age, our calling to fulfill. Oh, let it all thy powers engage to do my master's will. Help me to watch and pray and on thyself rely. You know the rest. And so that's what we really are called to do. And that's what Phillips Memorial will continue to do.
That is fantastic, all of you. Now, I cannot let you leave without this final question, because I don't know, when I'm going to have this powerhouse of a group again. And very rarely does somebody post, please bring them back again. But somebody did do that. So I got to fulfill what the people want. So I'm going to have you all back again real soon. But my question as we close, we are in our 150th year. And I joke with Reverend Dr. Kelby. He likes to say we celebrated the 150th in December. We did, but this is our 150th year. And so we're continuing that celebration. We also have a general conference next year. As you all know, Bishop Marvin Frank Thomas is chairing the general conference in Cincinnati. And it is going to be a magnificent conference, I'm sure. Of that, and all of the delegates will be there, and all of the missionaries changing dress colors each day, and it is going to be a CME celebration par excellence. The young adults will be there, and everybody's. We got right now at count, I think we have 13 candidates. I think. All right, maybe some more will be added. Who knows? My question to you: What in your opinion, do we need in the next leaders of our church? This, first of all, let me say that this is not an aspersion or aside to the current leadership. This is the future leadership of the church. And so I want you to give me your thoughts. And I know some of you know the candidates. You perhaps know many of them, know them well, know them intimately. I'm just talking about in general, given the discussion that we've had. And we have a couple of positions, 2 or 3 maybe on the college. What are we looking for in the next Episcopal leaders of the church? Reggie has unmiked, so I'm gonna start with you. Excuse me, Dr. Walton. I'm
still Reggie, man. You all right? You all right?
So I want each of you to take a stab at that.
Let me get into trouble early.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I believe that we need to take a look at is qualifications. And what I mean by that is heart. How their heart, are they in this for is their heart right in their pursuit of the episcopacy? Or is this just a pursuit of power and a purple shirt? Secondly, I believe that what we must examine is vision for the church. Are we still looking to do 8-track ministry in an iTunes world? As a matter of fact, iTunes is going the way of the dinosaur. And so we've got to take a look at how are we going to move.
Did he say 8-track? Oh my
goodness. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. My first car had an 8-track in it. But lastly, we must look at fiscal responsibility. Has this person ever had the responsibility of overseeing large financial things, and how and let me also have this. What is the idea for relieving the pressure of assessment? Are we going to come up with ways where the local church is not responsible for carrying all of the water? But matter of fact, can we come up with vehicles that will allow us to offset this financial burden that a lot of our churches are under? And so I think in looking at those qualifications, and we must be prayerful in who we allow or who we select as we come. Are they people of prayer, or are they just saying, look, this is the next, this is the next thing that's expected of me?
Thank you. Dr. Shazetta?
Yes, sir. So I think Dr. Walton did really well to point out the specific things with denominational things that are specific. And so I want to frame this way. While I was still figuring out what I wanted to be when I grew up, I also decided to pursue a Master of Social Work. It's a clinical social work degree. And amidst all of those things that they taught us, one of the places that they honed in for us in the clinical area was around the difference between was around death and dying, right? And they taught us about two different groups of people. One group of people that was dying, that is to say, a group of people that cannot be helped short of a miracle from God. A group that you put on hospice, a group that you simply make comfortable. And they said to us, that is not a group that you pour resources into. Not that it's a waste of time, but it's not necessarily the best use of time. It's not good stewardship, to use church speak. But then they spent a lot of time talking to us about a suicidal group. And they said to us, if an individual or group of persons comes to, or a group of people comes to you that are set on taking their own lives, they're having suicidal ideations, that's the place where you put your focus, because they can live. They have everything in them needed to live. They just have some decisions that need to be made. They need to be led out of the idea that they cannot live, that they cannot thrive, that they cannot grow. And so I remember, I want to say, someone may correct me in the comments, it may have been 2014 or so, and my folk have heard me say it 100 times. I was flabbergasted. It was a pastor's conference, and the theme for that conference was something like declining, aging, gray. It said everything but dying. Declining, aging, graying. And that said to me that as a people, we have a perspective of our own selves that is suicidal at the very best. Right. And so I think that for me, that those who we are looking at as leaders of the church, we've got to be sure that we are not bringing in hospice care workers or undertakers, but that we are bringing in specialists, right? That we are bringing in bone specialists, that we are bringing in lung specialists, that we are bringing in planners, that we are bringing in strategic planners and financial planners, that we are bringing in people who can look at our church and says, yep, we might look this way, but there's still some hope that these bones can live. And I think that if we can find it in our hearts to put aside the politics and the polity and look toward purpose and possibility, that we've got a chance, y'all, at being a CME church that is around celebrating 300 years in another 150. And so I think that as we look at leaders, that's what we've got to look at this 13 or however many it will be by the time that we arrive at General Conference, and say, do we have undertakers and hospice care workers here who are just content letting us die as long as we die well? Or do we have people who are going to put everything they can, specialists who will breathe life into us, who will put us on oxygen, who will say to us, hey, trim the fat here, so that we are not a church that is dying? It is suicidal for us to think that we can continue to deny the voice and the personhood of entire generations, whether that be older or younger. It's suicidal for us to think that we can continue in the same way that we are around finances, conference claims, and apportionments. It's suicidal that we can continue to think that evangelism cannot be at the forefront, that marketing is not important. These are things that we need this new set of leaders to come in and say, no, let's regroup. Let's regroup. And as Article 22 says, it has always been that we have been a changing people with the changing of times according to the changing of men's needs and behavior. And so let's be willing to shift and let's be willing to change. And those are the leaders that we want to bring in to the CME Church at General Conference 2022 in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. McIntosh, and then Dr. Gordon, you'll get the final word. Dr. McIntosh.
I must agree with Dr. Walton and Dr. Thompson-Hill. What I see, what we need possibly, or what they've been describing, is a proper process to vet. I have, outside of the church, worked on search committees, which is not our process at all. But I have seen the value of vetting. We know what we want. Vetting is a way to find out who meets it. We cannot just continue to let this be a popularity, personality contest, but we must use the process of vetting to ask the right questions, not only of those who want to offer themselves, but we've got to check them out. We've got to check out their past. We've got to check out their records. We've got to check out their history to see what maybe would prevent them from being what we are expecting of them. We must, through the process, not have people that we set up to fail, but work as the church to help them to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. McIntosh. Dr. Gordon.
So again, thank you for the conversation. Y'all are just awesome. I just say it. Y'all are just awesome. And I'm all for claim forgiveness. I pay $72,000 in claims. So God bless you. I'm all for it. I'm all for claims, dealing with conference claims. God bless you. I want to just say something very quickly. What I don't want people to hear through some of the remarks as it relates to the types of persons that we want to lead our church, we're not looking for perfection. And so if you're looking at persons who have made no mistakes, who have not had any shortcomings or anything like that, then nobody's going to be elected bishop. I'm just telling you that right now. So again, it's not about perfect people. In fact, I would rather elect someone who had some challenges, who have overcome those challenges in a great way through the power of the Lord Jesus Christ, through the unction of the Holy Spirit, and has proven themselves, as opposed to one who purports to have no challenges or no impediments at all. That's just my own personal. So do with that what you must. But I'm looking for leaders, those who have learned the lessons of the pandemic, right? Those who embrace the shift. I don't think we need, and the Lord just kind of put this in me, we don't need more ambition. We need anointing. We don't need more ambition. We need anointing. We need those who are anointed for post-pandemic ministry, those who are anointed to embrace innovation, those who are anointed to embrace economic development, those who are anointed to be compassionate leaders, compassionate not just to the good old boys club, but compassionate towards women, towards children, towards youth, towards young adults, those who would listen, those who understand that maintenance of buildings and of rituals can never replace serving the needs of people and meeting the needs of people. So again, we need innovation. We need those who have embraced a ministry of excellence, if you will, and endeavor to do the very same as they work to co-lead our church. So again, I think it makes sense that we find persons who have been relevant in ministry and not have sought to boost themselves up, but come as true servant leaders. We don't need ambition. We need anointing. And so that's who we're looking for. I pray for our general conference next year. I will have on 17 masks, but I'm excited about the opportunity to go to Cincinnati, Ohio. Y'all gonna see, you're already crazy, but yes, I have on 17 masks. But nevertheless, we're looking for anointed leadership, compassionate leadership, relevant leadership, and those leaders who embrace excellence.
Masks and a can of Lysol, my brother. Yes, sir.
Oh, you ain't never can of Lysol. I am so.
I'm part of the host, so y'all come on. We will be ready, and we will show you how to host a general conference.
We are looking forward to coming to Cincinnati for so many reasons, and especially with the underground history, underground museum history, etc. There. We know it's going to be great. And yes, I'm going to have on a number of masks. It won't be 17, Dr. Joe, but I'll have my mask and my wipes, and as long as they space the delegates, give us some space. We can't be all on top of you. That's right, Red and Lysol. But let me say this as I close. I'm so grateful to you. Far exceeded my expectations, but I shouldn't be surprised. And I am going to invite you all back. I plan to invite each candidate to come. I'm not doing a debate. To me, debates are useless. You can't get to the heart and soul when you got 13 people responding to one question at a time. So I'm going to invite each candidate to come. They may accept, they may not. And I got two questions. Why do you want to be a bishop now? And what do you bring? Okay, that's what I want to hear. We want to hear from them. No speeches. No points. Talk to the people that watch and listen, because the future of our church may be in your hands. Thank you, my brothers and sisters. As I tell all of my guests who come on the show, I owe you lunch at the general conference. So I'm gonna have a long line at McDonald's getting you all sandwiches, but you will get your
the dollar menu.
The dollar menu, brother, Dr. Joe, you will get your lunch. Before we leave, a couple of quick announcements that I want to share with you. Don't go. CME Grow continues. I stayed up a couple of nights until about 2 or 3 o'clock watching it. It was excellent. The teaching from these great preachers, Dr. Van Williams and Dr. Kathy Jones, and Dr. Washington and Dr. Thurman. It is exceptional. Thank you, General Secretary Leon Moore, for the great work that you're doing as well. Also on, I think tomorrow, let me see if I can find that here and put this up. There's a celebration honoring Bishop William Henry Graves on Monday, 7 o'clock p.m., a evening of music, inspiration, and remembrance supporting Bishop Graves, who was indeed a very dear friend and certainly one of my favorite bishops as well. I want to also announce that I'm doing 2 pilgrimages next year. In February, I'm leading a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And if you are interested in this pilgrimage, please reach out to me. Last year, year before last, we went and it was life-changing. And then in July, after the General Conference, I'll be leading a pilgrimage to Ghana. And I'm inviting those who've always wanted to go to Africa, but have yet to visit it, to come and to have your life changed in the motherland. And so if you're interested in that, reach out to me, inbox me. And I'll be happy to provide that information to you. Thank you all for joining me today and dealing through a few of the little technical problems that we had, but we got through. What an incredible panel. Dr. McIntosh, Dr. Gordon, Dr. Thompson-Hill, Dr. Walton, God bless you and your ministries.
Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. Thank you
for
letting
the old lady sit with the future of our church.
Dr. McIntosh, stop. Ain't nothing old about you.
I wish I had your energy.
I know, we all do. God bless you all, and continue to stay safe and to go in love and to go in peace. And may, as one of my wonderful members on our prayer line said, may the good Lord bless you real good. This concludes, amen, another episode of CME 150 Conversations with Skip Mason. God bless you all. Take care.
God bless.